So, here's a quick look at the basics of ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs. But before we are diving in, there are a few things I'd like to mention. First, on this little adventure, we are only going to cover the so-called monoliteral hieroglyphs. Basically, the ones that stand for just a single sound. Later on, we will get into the other types as well, like for example, biliteral hieroglyphs, and even beyond. Second, we won't be getting too deep into how to actually read hieroglyphs this time. I know that sounds weird, given the context of this journey. But the thing is, these symbols can be arranged in different ways. And depending on which direction they are facing, left or right, you'd read them left to right or right to left. But don't worry, we will tackle that in another part of our journey. Third, we are not going into full-on grammar mode here. Instead, I will simply show you one example word for each hieroglyph to help you get a feel for them and make them stick in your mind. And lastly, my pronunciation skills. Yeah, let's just say they are a work in progress. Because some of these sounds, especially the ones you find in Arabic, can be a bit tricky. So, apologies in advance if I butcher any of them. With that in mind, let's get started. Starting with our first letter, A. This hieroglyph is depicted as a vulture, representing the sound A. However, keep in mind the Egyptians didn't write vowels the way we do. Their A isn't exactly like ours. It's what linguists call semi-vocalic, similar to the Arabic Ain. But don't worry too much about the other hieroglyphs in this word just yet. We will unpack those as we go. So, the word we are looking at is abkek. Well, actually abkech, which means to clap the hands. Notice that sneaky E in the brackets? It's there to make pronunciation easier when we are not sure what vowel actually fits. Because remember, ancient Egyptians had a habit of leaving out vowels altogether, and let's face it, considering they carved their writing into stone walls very often, it does make sense to skip them, right? Next, we move on to a hieroglyph shaped like a foot. Actually, a little bit of flag as well. This one represents the sound B. And if you caught my first little trip, you might recognize this in the word weapon, which means to shine or to rise. Now, I need to apologize for the less than perfect image quality here. It was a challenge to find one that matches the visual detail I wanted to show you. But this helps highlight an important point. Hieroglyphs can have varying styles, similar to the fact that we all have similar writing styles as well. The ideogram or ideograph might look slightly different, which is totally normal. Now it's getting interesting. Meet a hieroglyph of a placenta, which makes the sound k, a soft k. Think of the Scottish loch, and you have got it. Sometimes you won't see an E in brackets, because it's unnecessary for pronunciation, assuming of course you can say the word to begin with. And yes, I reused this word, because there's more to explain, not because I was lazy, I swear. Next up is a stylized hand, representing the sound D. And here's a little fun fact. When people claim that ancient Egyptians had helicopters, for whatever reason, or submarines, presumably for the Nile I guess, and they are often looking at overcarved hieroglyphs, and the D hieroglyph frequently shows up in these cases. Overcarving wasn't unusual. And this word, ked, means to fare downstream. At the end, you will see a boat hieroglyph. It is an ideogram that doesn't make a sound but clarifies meaning, and you will soon understand why these silent ideograms are essential. Now, on to an arm hieroglyph, which stands for the sound. You might recognize the word re, meaning sun. And yes, it's the same word used for the sun god Ra or Re. The difference? Well, the ideogram. But in this case, you could rely solely on the ideograms if you wanted. They may be silent, but they carry a lot of weight in terms of context. Oh look, a snake. Specifically, a horned viper. Fascinating, right? Again, apologies for the image quality. So, from left to right, we have got our vulture, R, followed by the horned viper, and finally an adorable quail chick, which stands for U. Later on we will see another sound it can represent. Together, these form the word afu, which means to injure. Interestingly, the ancient Egyptians didn't have a distinct V sound, but the horned viper was often used in its place. So, up next we have a char, which represents the sound G. Don't stress about the two other hieroglyphs beside it just yet. We will get to those soon, I promise. The word ger means night. And if you look closely, you can spot the sky embedded in the design. So, moving on, we have a reed hut, which symbolizes one of the two H sounds, the two H sounds. Notice how the familiar sun ideogram pops up again. And this reveals how hieroglyphs can share semantic links, connecting related ideas. For example, in the word heru, meaning day, the sun ideogram points us toward the context. In this case, daytime in the desert, when the sun dominates the sky. These silent ideograms aren't just decoration, even though they look really pretty. They are essential clues. Now, this H sound has a rougher breathe to it. It is almost like the initial sound in hot. It's all about expelling the breath forcefully. And enter the next H sound, represented by a twisted flax. Notice the dot under the H? That's a marker for smoother breathing, more like the H in hello. Again, apologies for the image quality here. Now we see a beautiful owl. Our twisted flax and a crocodile ideogram. The word mesech means crocodile. Next up is the I sound. Actually, it's hovering between I and J, represented by a reed leaf, the kind that grows by riverbanks. Adjacent to it sits again our beautiful owl, forming the word im, meaning therein. A quick side note, there's a nearly identical hieroglyph with a small but significant difference. The number of reed leaves, so watch out for that. Oh, there's another snake. This time it is a cobra, and it signifies a j sound, like in judge. Here's where things get interesting. Stacked hieroglyphs. Read these top to bottom, with an ideogram below them. The word jed means eternity, and the horizontal line grounds its meaning. Now, the handled basket representing k. Careful, there will be a similar sound coming soon. We see another owl and our basket, with a third ideogram, a stylized arm. It looks like as it would offering us something. The word meg means behold. So, now it's time for something unique. The L sound is absent in ancient Egyptian and only later adopted by Greek scholars. You will find it in names like the great queen Cleopatra. The rope hieroglyph used here is a special case, which we will revisit soon. But first, let us admire this owl again. This is one of my favorites. It stands for And there's another K sound, which is usually transliterated as K, with a Q. This one comes from further back in the mouth than K. The word Kemet means Egypt or Black Land. Next, just simple peaks representing N. We can go through this rather quickly, as most of these symbols are now familiar. The final hieroglyph here, again another ideogram, and we have the word bin, meaning miserable. So, and here's our rope again. As mentioned, vowels often aren't written, but for a short O, the rope steps in. There's also the quail chick, sometimes seen representing a long O, though I haven't found any example for this one. Lastly, we have the woven reed mat, well, rectangle, which stands for P. The original name of the god Anubis was Inub, with that beautiful ideogram at the end. And you may notice the absence of an E between N and P, replaced by an U. This traces back to ancient translations. Scholars recorded these names during their travels, allowing us to match them later on. And yes, that deserves its own short video. Let me know if you're interested. Now we come to a mouth, representing the sound R. Take a look at this beautiful word, nefer, which means beautiful. Notice how this time the ideogram appears at the start. Now we have a bit weird looking symbol. It is supposed to be a bolt of folded cloth, and it is representing the S sound, so S. You will see here that sometimes a word can include more than one ideogram. Take Neges, which means commoner or poor man. It's illustrated with a kneeling man and a simple bird, perhaps hinting at the notion of an ordinary person. And now, an old friend, the semicircle, if you remember from our first trip. This is supposed to be a loaf of bread, and it represents the T sound, paired with our woven reed mat, or rectangle, and we get the word pet. Additionally, our ideogram for sky, and we have the word for sky. So, let's revisit our cute quail chick. Now it is used for the sound V. And with the word via, which with the boat ideogram here, means sacred boat. By now, you might have started noticing a pattern with ideograms. Isn't it interesting how to fare downstream and sacred boat share the same ideogram, a river-related theme? And here's our quail chick again, this time taking on the sound oo. And you might be able to spot a trend here. In the word heru, which means stay, you will see the quail chick sitting in a different spot. And here's the simplified rule. It's read as V when it starts a word. It is read as U when it is either in the middle or at the end. And if you're curious, I can share in the comment section a deeper dive into this topic. Just let me know. We are almost there. Next, we see the reed leaf again, but doubled up to represent the Y, actually pronounced like a long E, like in Mary. This can be tricky, since it's not always easy to tell if it is a double E or Y, or just a single Y. Take for instance the word ke, meaning another. This word is actually in a masculine form, and yes, ancient Egyptian had grammatical genders. By the way, speaking of genders, the next hieroglyph is a bolt on a door, which stands for Z. With that, we can now read Z. With its ideogram at the end, a sitting woman, indicating that the word means woman. And yes, sometimes an ideogram can even stand alone and still representing the whole word and also keeping the pronunciation intact. Just two more. This time, we have a pool of water, which represents sh. Even though it looks like two letters in English, it's actually just one sound. Now, take a look at this word, resh, which, with two ideograms at the end, means to rejoice or to be glad. And finally, we reach the last symbol, tethering rope, which represents the sound sh. And though it's spelled with three letters this time in English, it is still just a single sound. And actually, I only could find one example, and that was the word Recenu, which means Syria or Palestine. If you have actually made it this far and followed along, well done. You have now a solid grasp of the basics of ancient Egyptian hieroglyphic alphabet. That's a mouthful. Great work. You do not only know 25 or 26 hieroglyphs and how to read them and what they are standing for, but you also have learned your first 20 plus words in ancient Egyptian. Although, admittedly, the pronunciation of some of these could be better. I hope I see you on the next journey.